All right, this is just a short tutorial on how to use the Panoply visualization application. First of all, I'm going to assume you've already downloaded it, but if you haven't, this is the website you go to download it. It's www.gis.nasa.gov/tools/panoply. You can see it on the screen here. And if you scroll down, there's a download Panoply, but I just wanted to point out also that you may need to download additional color bars or additional map overlays, particularly if you're doing anything that's any simulations that are paleoclimate where you need different continental configurations as your overlays. And this is where you would go back to get those at a later time. If you go to download Panoply link here, you'll see there are versions of Panoply for Mac, Windows, Linux. The demonstration I'm going to give today is on a Mac, but it basically operates the same on all these operating systems. All right. Um, so once you've installed Panoply, start it up. And when you actually start up Panoply, the very first thing it does is ask you to open some data. I have some sample data files set up here. It's possible that your instructor has actually given you these same sample files for use with this tutorial. But any NetCDF files will work if you're working with other data from either EasyGCM or EdGCM or from anywhere else that you may have gotten the NetCDF data. You can use that for how you run this tutorial. I'm going to open a first data set here called pre-industrial control. And when you open the first data set, you open something called the sources browser. So this is the Panoply sources browser. You can hide the info on the right-hand side here, which is giving you details about what's in the data, how the NetCDF is constructed in that data set. But mostly what you care about for making your visualizations is that you'll see a data set open up here, and then you see the variables that are in that data set. These data that I'm using for examples here are actually the map variables. So AIJ in the NASA GISS lingo are the latitude by longitude variables. And once you do have a data set open, making your first map is as simple as double clicking on one of the variables. So you can see the variables, by the way, have a short name and a long name. And we'll start with surface air temperature. I double click on that. So you have a lot of options here. The options that you will use most of the time will be the ones that are selected by default. You want a georeference latitude by longitude color contour plot. What you will open here if you just click create is something that looks like a map. Now, when you open your map, you actually it will open in whatever projection that you have chosen to save as your default. In this particular case, the default projection that I've saved is an orthographic projection, but I'd like to actually just start out by showing you how to save a different default projection because you may want to use a particular projection over and over. To do that, you go to the palette, which has all of the Panoply controls. It shows up on the upper left-hand side here. Within this palette, the first thing I'll do is actually go and select the map projection menu item. Once I'm in that menu item, I can get to all of the various projections that are available for Panoply, and there are a lot. The one that I like to use the most for tutorials like this would be either the Robinson or the Mole Wide. Let's use the Robinson today. This shows a full global map. And just to show you quickly how I would actually save this as my default, if you go up to the plot menu in Panoply, the very bottom item in the plot menu says save plot settings as preferences. This is really useful because what it will do the next time you open Panoply or create a map in Panoply is use the same color bar, the same map projection, the same overlay. So you don't have to reset all of those things every single time. So I'm going to save those preferences, and you'll see in a minute when we open another data set how this new default is now set up. Um, the 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 various items that are available for making your visualizations your own are all listed in this menu that I was at before. You will not need to you will not need to go through every single one of these when you make your maps. You'll sort of get in the habit of just going to the ones that you need for your particular purpose. Um, the the maps always open with this arrays tab chosen. And you'll see that it says by default array one only. And that's because we only have one array open at the time. If, for example, I go back and I say, I want to open another data set. So I go to the file menu, open another data set. This time I'm going to choose this RCP 85, 8.5 here. You'll see now my browser shows that I have a second data set open. If I go and double click on the surface air temperature from this one, from this data set, again, it gives me these choices, but I'll choose the default. It makes a second map. Now, this is a different data set. It is now using the preferences that I set a minute ago. In other words, I'm automatically getting a Robinson projection here. I should have mentioned also that there's a tab here that shows you the data that is actually being used to construct this scientific visualization. And let's see, this also has the data set. And this is where you can also see that what the name of the data set is if you click on this tab, as well as you can see in the title of the window. But in each case, the plot controls for both of these maps shows this array tab as array one only. And no matter which window I have, it's array one only. However, if I close one of these down, I'll close down the one I just made, and I'll click back here to show the map. If instead I wanted to take an anomaly between two data sets, I have that option back here in the data browser. I'll go back to the data browser a second here. And instead of double clicking on a variable, or I could have just clicked on the create plot button. That's the same as double clicking. I instead say I want to combine this plot. So this control up here, combine plot, if I select a variable, click on combined plot, it now asks me which plot should I be combining this new data set with. So in this case, I only have one other data set open at this time. But if I had multiple maps that were created, I'd get a selection as to which one do I want to combine with. And if I then click combine, you'll notice that this window now not only has it has one map, but there are two array tabs here. And that's because this particular plot is a combination of two data sets. And the way that they are combined, if you look back at the plot controls again, now is displayed in this particular menu here. So I still have the arrays tab or the arrays menu item showing, but now the way they're combined is this is array one minus array two. I could change that to array 2 minus array 1. There are other options here. But basically, let's say I have array 2 minus array 1 here. If I look at my two array data sets, array 2 is the RCP 85, array 1 is the pre-industrial control. So I'm taking the RCP run minus the pre-industrial control run, and this is the plot of that difference. Now there are a lot of things you can. I'm not going to go through every single setting that's available for Panoply. You can play around with a lot of these, but some that you will likely use, I'll just go through quickly. Um, when you go to the labels tab, this is how you can change the title. I don't really need to change necessarily the title of this plot because it's surface air temperature. Well, actually, because this is an anomaly map already, maybe I would change this title to difference. Oops. Dif Difference in surface air temperature, something along those lines, and maybe use the subtitle to say the differences between which data sets. So RCP 8.5 minus a pre-industrial PI control. There are other options here in terms of changing the font sizes, etc., that you'll notice here. But the labels tab here is where you can change the label on the top of your map here. The map projection I already ran through. There's a lot of map projections, but what I didn't say is that you're also able to rotate the Earth to be centered on a different longitude or in some cases latitude. For example, instead of this being centered on 0 degrees, if I center it on 180, you'll see that the map actually rotates to being centered over the international date line now. So if you are interested in having your analysis focus on a specific area, you may want to center it differently. This particular map projection does not allow you to change the center latitude. We're always centered on the equator here. But if I go back to the orthographic, which I had open before, and now if I were to center that, now I can actually rotate the globe based on the latitude as well. So for example, let's say I put in 90 degrees north here. You'll notice that what's happening here now is that I'm looking down on the North Pole. If I made that a minus 90, I'm looking down on the South Pole. So that's Antarctica there. Depending on which projections you're using, you may have some slightly different options, but just be aware that this is not only where you change the projection, but it's also where you can change where the projection is centered. Another one that you're likely to use is the scale menu item. In the scale here, you'll notice that this map doesn't give you a lot of detail because the scale isn't set correctly now that I've turned this into an anomaly map. So with an anomaly map, you would generally like to center the scale on 0. And so you take your min and your max and you make them symmetrical. So let's say minus 10 to 10. This puts 0 down at the center of the scale on the color bar. And obviously, I just chose a particular scale right now as minus 10 to 10, but you may have to play around with that in order to get something that, sort of makes the data pop. But now if I were to save my preferences here, this particular color bar, actually, I'm not sure whether I want to correct myself there. If you save preferences, the scale is not saved. The scale always defaults to the data set that you open. So you will definitely need to be playing around with this scale control in order to make your maps, look the way you want them. This is also where you've changed the color bars. Panoply has a lot of color bar options, and there's even more that you can download. Um, for for temperature, I just happen to like to use Panoply's default. There's one called Panoply Diff, and the 32 means it has 32 bins. The reason I like the Panoply Diff option here is it does provide a really nice color bar for use with anomaly maps because when you center it on zero, you get a really big distinction between the right side or like increasing values and the left side colors which show decreasing values. Again, play around with everything in here. You're not going to hurt anything, but if you want to see what all the other controls do, that's fine. Oh, I should say this is the location where you change the label on your scale also. So if you want to customize it, you can choose custom down here and change that to say degrees Celsius. Um, And as long as we're looking at the label on the scale, you will notice that Panoply by default does show you a little bit of interesting information with regards to your data in the plot window. So it shows you the minimum of the data, the maximum of the data, and the mean of the data. So Um, there are other things you may want to play around with here. The only other thing that I'm going to spend any time on right now for this brief tutorial is the overlays, because some of you may actually choose to do simulations that where you're showing different time periods in Earth history, and once you'll notice you can put up to 3 overlays on here. But if right now, if I just picked a different continental overlay, and let me just pick something that makes it really obvious what's happening here. If I picked a Cretaceous overlay from 100 million years ago, and let me go back and use the map projection tab to recenter it on zero, you'll see that the continental outlines are different than a modern continental outline. This would be the position of the continents from 100 million years ago, so during the Cretaceous. Um, I'm gonna switch my overlay back to the appropriate overlay for this particular data set. Um, There are a lot of modern Earth overlays here. You can play around and see if there's any you particularly like more, well, more than the other. Some show countries and coastlines differently, etc. So I just picked one of the modern Earth. So there's a modern Earth that shows the actual country outlines in U.S. states. All right, that's sort of the quick Panoply tutorial. The next video, I will show you how to do some slightly different data sets with Panoply.